you can't lead others when you're not connected with them. So you have to connect first and then you can lead. But no one really teaches us what is it, what does it mean to connect with someone?
I was actually almost frozen by fear of allowing strangers into my body zone. And then you came along and just helped me cope with that situation.
When people practice for longer times, I do see that they come much more into an integrated self, being able to lead themselves more in life aligned with their vision or their values.
Hi, Ellen, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy and also excited to see you here. We have actually known each other for quite some years. I actually think it was around 2012 in Denmark that you were one of the facilitators on, was it authentic relating or something like that? It was absolutely a stunner for me, and it really learned me a lot about my own challenges when it comes to relating in a more, intimate way when I'm out in groups. And you were one of them that helped me through that process so many years ago, 12 years ago, and now we are here. So yeah, very welcome. And who are you?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Kenneth. I look forward to having this conversation with you, and especially about this topic that's very dear to me. And as you were speaking about our first meeting, it's so funny because we really connected. So there's a weekend, and I think it might have been like the evening of the second day. So we were already quite a bit in, and I have no recollection of you before that. But then
No.
that meeting, that moment we met, and then we really met, and I can vividly remember that. And
Yeah, and me too. And for the viewers out there, perhaps it's a bit interesting. I had really anxiety about being around groups, and this setting, with perhaps 12 or 14 people in the room with plus facilitators. We were having all types of exercises where we were going to be more intimate, looking each other into the eyes. And then there was a particular exercise where we had to lie on the floor and cuddle. And I was just so terrified about it. I was actually almost frozen by fear of allowing strangers into my body zone. And then you came along and just helped me cope with that situation. So I think that was actually, a very vivid moment for me.
yeah, and I want to point it out because for me or I wanted to name it because for me it points to like when we actually meet on a deep level that yeah I throughout the 12 years like we have been in touch sometimes and then also for long periods we haven't. Then every time I meet you again I can sense that connection,
Mm,
just being there. It's like timeless in a way. And
exactly. Yeah.
that to me is such an important part of this work that I'm doing and that we're going to talk about today.
Mm.
Yeah.
And you are calling it transformational connection, isn't that true?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And
It
could you say a bit about how did you come into that? 2012 is 12 years ago, so you must be on this path for quite some years.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was actually working in the public sector in the Netherlands and as an interim manager. So I was doing big projects with different ministries. And at some point, I started working with this little foundation within the government, and they were training the future leaders of the public sector. And I was part of that. And so we were with this amazing group of young people, um, exploring on this path of self-discovery, leadership in general, and we did all kinds of uh, explorations, and so we started to explore mindfulness and nonviolent communication, and I guess we were also doing we space practice, although we didn't name it as such,
Mm.
but a lot of group work as well. And in that time, I got invited to a circling event, and circling is the practice that we're talking about, and we call it now transformational connection. I'll come back to that
Mm.
in a moment. And yeah, I was. It's actually in the second weekend that I went, I was blown away by it. It was so powerful, and what I liked about it was the self discovery in connection, like learning so much about myself, and also seeing how I am moving in a group and how I'm leading myself, and
Mm.
finding all the habitual ways how I tend to do when I'm with people, and seeing especially where I hold back. That was, of course, painful, but it felt also like such an important part to discover about myself. And to
Mm.
me, this practice just felt like an incredible catalyst for leadership development.
Mm.
So, yeah, I
Why,
don't
why,
think.
why do you think it's important for leadership to have this type of practice?
Well, first of all, it's like, yeah, learning about yourself,
Mm.
learning because yeah, learning about how am I actually interacting, how am I holding back, what do I want, how do I bring that into connection, or how do I lead myself, how do I, engage others with my
Yeah,
vision, the vision that
yeah.
I want to bring into the world. How can I connect with people and inspire them? How can I
Mm.
get the best out of them?
Mm.
Having bring their talents and gifts and put them, at the
Mm.
table. And so those questions, I think, are really answered, or you can find
Yeah, yeah.
in this book.
So part of leadership is definitely, to work through groups of people, and the best way you can do that is by being connected to the group, and people feel that they are included. And this type of practice will give you more access to yourself, and also free up resources and potentials in you for better connecting and better bringing out the best both in yourself and the team. That I think that really makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, yes,
And then on the other side, something that you said, I think is very important. Like, you can't lead others when you're not connected with them. So you have to connect first, and then you can lead.
yeah,
And but no one really teaches us what does it mean to connect with someone. And I think some people are naturally born with a gift to just connect easily with people,
yeah,
and some people it's more difficult. So yeah, and I think there is a skill to that you can learn. Like, what
yeah,
does it really mean to be connected with someone? How can you
yeah.
impact the connection, either to deepen it or create more closeness, or um, yeah, and those are important skills, I think, that
Yeah.
are taught within this practice.
So how long back are we when you went on your first circling event?
Well, I think it is actually quite just before I met you, like 6 months
Ah,
before I met you.
yeah.
So
Okay.
about 13 years ago now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and at that time I was leading the organization in the Netherlands, and that assignment was for 3 years, and that came to an end. And I had to decide, like, what's my next step. And I was
Mm.
thinking, I'm just gonna switch career and dive straight into this practice. And
Mm.
yeah, and
So this is actually what you do now on a full scale. Could you say how does your work life look like? Uh,
yeah, so I work with people one on one in a coaching container. And then I also teach others about this practice. And
mm,
we do that in 6 month training, where we
mm,
teach people to be a facilitator of this practice. And I also am on the faculty of the circling coaching training.
yes.
So then we first teach people, like, how to yeah, how to bring circling or how to practice with people circling. And then we're kind of teaching them how to bring that into a one-on-one container,
Mm.
work with
Yeah.
someone for a longer period of time.
Okay. Yeah. We will put the link to this was it a 6 month program
Yeah,
or 9 months? Was it 6 months?
in 6 months. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do them
Okay.
in person and online. And for the rest, I have courses online and like shorter events where we just have like little immersions of going into this practice.
Yeah.
And these are often attended by people that are already practitioners, but also people that are curious and want to learn.
Mm. And the core thing that you try to educate people or bring forward is the ability to connect. But what is connection? It's a big word. Many uses it. But if you should put a few words to connection and the art of connecting, what is and what is transformational connecting?
Yeah. Well, what is connection? What I often say is, in a way, we are already connected.
Mm,
So the connection it exists already. So there's not something to do to establish a connection. However, we do sometimes feel more connected or a bit more disconnected, either from ourselves or to the other person.
mm,
And I think that speaks to the quality of the connection.
mm,
So there is a quality of the connection that we can perceive, and often there's a longing for a certain quality of connection that we want.
mm,
And so what we teach or what we practice is bringing those two more in alignment.
mm,
So that could be like, oh, I want to feel more closeness, or I want to open the connection for more of you or more of me. Then how can I lead myself, and what can I do to make an invitation for you to step into that connection in a certain
mm.
way?
Yeah,
Um, and so that's really the dance that we're in. It's like
yeah,
moment to moment, because then it also changes and we impact each other, and then all of a sudden you say something and I'm like, oh, now I feel it's a bit, I want to, I need a bit more distance. And then there's, so yeah, how can you align with that dance and just stay true to what's actually emerging in me, and then
mm,
taking in account not just my own experience but the other's experience and what's emerging in the space in between.
yeah. When I think about, and I often bring, as psychosynthesis perspective into connection, and from that point of view, I operate with different layers or levels of connection. That could be physical connection, sexual connection. That can be more friendly connection. That can be a mental connection if you share deep interest. And there can even be a spiritual connection that you are on some kind of a path together, uh, serving humanity. And there are many ways of speaking about that. But is there, within the core teaching that you provide, is there this differentiation between the different levels of connection? Because I think it's important when you are connecting to another human being that you in some way understand and perceive what it is for a type of connection you have to the other person, because sometimes it can be purely physical. You just want to have sex with the other person, and sometimes it can be purely mental. You are just, wow, so attracted to the mindset of the other person. Does this make sense?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. And how it like lands in me is like, yeah, how powerful it would be to name that. So if you perceive the connection in a certain way and you're able to presence that, so reveal what the connection means to you or how you see it, that opens up, maybe something in the other person that they can reveal. But I think what it will do for sure is deepen the connection. So
Mm,
it doesn't need to like then all of a sudden include other aspects of connecting. But I do think that naming what's present, naming the connection, 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 naming the will bring more aliveness to the connection
Mm.
and
Yeah.
potentially deepen the bond that you feel with someone. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
actually, it's really beautiful to have this spiritual connection with you or
Mm.
whatever type of
Yeah,
connection.
and then we come to the transformational part, because sometimes it can, for some people, be shameful if they feel certain feelings or experiences with another human being, because there can be taboos, or there can be all kind of stuff you have. I have had anxiety through most of my life, and I really had to work with that in order to be relaxed, and also not having shame about feeling close to another human being. And it's it's still a work in progress. But um, and then we come to the transformational part. What type of learning, or what type of techniques, or what type of, yeah, what do you do in order to make people more comfortable with whatever is emerging in a relationship?
Yeah. So it's interesting that you'd say that because I think what we do is on one side really simple, being with. We're just meeting what's here. So if there's shame, let's just feel the shame together.
Mm, mm,
You can feel it. I'm here with you. I'm not going away. I'm not going to reject you. I'm not going to, laugh at you. I'm just being with you as you're feeling it.
mm,
And oftentimes when we're meeting the present moment or what's emerging just with an openness and a curiosity, like, oh, what's it like to feel the shame?
mm,
Um, and then it gets felt and it starts to transform. Or I like the word unfold. So it
mm,
starts to unfold and something else starts to emerge, and then we'll just be with that.
mm,
So what we practice is really beholding the moment as it is, not wanting to fix or change, or nothing needs to be resolved. We're just
mm,
practicing
mm.
meeting the moment with an attitude of presence, I would say. So it's not just
Yeah.
like a witness capacity, like I'm seeing you, but it's actually like I'm being here with you, I'm holding space for you, and I'm
Mm,
feeling you as you know, you're feeling the things that you're feeling.
mm,
So, and that's just super powerful and transformational. And that's why we call it transformational connection. It's not like we do a certain type of connection and then that leads to transformation, but we continuously see that just being with and just deep
mm,
the connection is in and of itself transformational.
mm. And now, I think we should avoid the pitfall. We both of us know how we practice, but the viewers out there don't know the setting.
Hmm.
So could you say a few words about how do you practice it? How, if you were a fly on the wall and looking down on two people doing this practice, what will you observe?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, there's of course different constellations and practices that we do. So you can practice one on one, you can also practice in a small group, and you can even practice with really large groups.
Mm,
Um, but one on one, it would look like just both being very present, first of all, with yourself in your own experience. It's sometimes I call it a relational meditation. It's like you would sit on a meditation cushion and just witnessing and feeling all the different aspects of experience.
mm,
And then you do that both, but then you start to include each other in in your awareness. So it's not just me and my experience, but it's actually me, and then there's you, and there's the relation between us, so the relational field or an us.
yeah.
And then what we practice or what we do is we kind of just start naming what it's like to be with each other.
Mm,
So being here with you, I notice or I feel, or maybe there's a desire, or could say something about the connection that I'm experiencing with you. I'm feeling
mm,
like a lot of joy speaking with you right now, and
mm,
I'm a bit surprised as I'm speaking, like how comfortable I'm feeling, and uh, yeah, it's just nice to feel the connection and what's coming out, the
mm,
answer or the conversation. I'm like enjoying it very much. It feels fresh, and
mm,
yeah, just feeling a lot of appreciation for you and for this conversation right now.
mm.
Um, yeah.
And I perhaps I should add that because this is something that is quite difficult when you're new to it, that there's a lot of eye contact,
Mm.
and it's actually quite unusual to have that much eye contact with, yeah, it could be a totally stranger.
Mhm.
And it's a very, very powerful experience to, yeah, and also sometimes overwhelming. And it
Yeah,
can even be intimate. What do you call it? Intimidating to be that close on another person. So,
yeah.
is that the core of the practice, or?
Well, I'll say two things about that. Like one, when I start to work with new people, I won't say do eye gazing or keep looking in someone's eye. I'm actually more interested in can you stay true to what's arising. So if that means like I feel uncomfortable, I need to look away, or actually want to move my body, I want to sit and look
Mm,
at you from the side, can you give yourself permission to follow your own leadership in that? So
mm,
I won't tell people like do the intense eye gazing. However, when you are getting more comfortable with that, with the eye gazing, I tend to think of it as a meditation with a focus point.
mm,
So with a focus in front, actually. So
mm,
yeah, you are in that moment. I'm like, yeah, you're just my focus point, my anchor. And especially when you go into uh, more expensive states, what often happens when there's a deep connection, um, yeah, reality might start to look very different. And then I find it's actually something really grounding or supportive to come back to, or just to stay in
mm.
as everything else seems to be turning and twirling, and then there's like you and me here.
Yes. And another thing, another setting is, that normally there is, or is it normally, but sometimes there is a facilitator, and there is a, what do you call the person who is not the facilitator?
Participant.
A participant, yes. Um, but is there always a facilitator, or can two people just, because if there's no facilitator, what's the purpose? Who's holding what? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so you can definitely practice all the time.
Mm,
I think that's my life. Like I'm constantly consciously relating with people I meet, and my partner and my friends,
yeah.
um, and it doesn't mean that it's always very intense, but I tend to have a connection to self, and I'm aware like how am I being impacted, what's actually happening for me, and what feels most aligned, or what do I want or need.
Mm,
Um, so it's definitely a practice, and it doesn't mean that when you practice one-on-one that there's always a facilitator. I think when you go to an event, there's a facilitator that holds the event, that guides the practices, etc. And then there are practices like more in the small groups that often have a facilitator, or
mm,
mostly have a facilitator.
yeah.
But everyone, it's not to say that the facilitator is the one doing the practice with someone, but actually everyone involved is practicing. So
Yeah.
even me, when I'm facilitating a process, I am in the practice with the people.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the purpose with this type of training is learn people or train people to connect with themselves, to see what emerges within them when they are connecting to another human being or perhaps even a group of people. So it's based on some kind of a capacity to observe what's going on inside. You could call it being present to the moment and what emerges in that moment. And if you feel called to it, then say out loud what's emerging for you in that particular space. And it is a kind of relational meditating process. Uh, I think perhaps we should do just a couple of minutes instead of speaking about it, then just present it for the viewers who don't know anything about this practice, and then see what emerges. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. So does that mean that you want me to facilitate, or is it we're just going to go into the practice because you know the practice also quite well?
uh, mm, what do you what do you think is most appropriate? Could be. I'm open.
Yeah, let's just dive in. Can I just say, because you said just now about why do people do this practice, and I
Yeah.
think you spoke to yeah, just the relational intelligence part, so becoming more aware of like what's happening in me in relationship to others, but also what's happening in others or in groups on the in the relational dynamics, and not just becoming aware but being able to respond to that in a
Mm,
way that aligns with your vision or with what you're wanting. Um, but I think on another level, I often, on my website, I have this slogan saying relationship as a path to unfolding, because I do think that this practice is also helping us to unfold into more wholeness. So we become more of who we actually are, and
mm,
it increases our capacity to embody presence.
mm.
And so not just like being present to what's arising in the moment, but also to embody qualities like love,
Mm,
wisdom, strength, and power,
mm,
the capacity to feel joy and
mm.
innocence, and let that inform you. And that's actually what really captured me in this
Yeah,
practice.
yeah.
Like, can we all become more loving, inclusive, uh,
Mm,
wise, and powerful people that are willing to bring our gifts? So when you
mm,
said like speaking up what's emerging, for me, it's not just that like, oh, we're bringing what we're noticing, but it's actually infused with your wisdom, with what you're perceiving. So your unique perception, your unique sight or insight about what's
mm.
happening. And I believe if we all start to bring that more, we as a and we are connected, then the collective
Mm,
has more potential to meet the challenges in life, and just be supportive of each other while we're
mm.
moving through life. Yeah.
And I think this mm, it raises a question about, where are people coming from? Because if we want to have also an inclusion of the spiritual domain, then we must have people who are open to that domain, that are not just coming from a purely materialistic point of view. And that has also been my experiences, that the connection is very, very different from one person to another person. Uh, we activate different elements in each other when we come together. So if two people are on a spiritual path already and have access to that domain of themselves, of course, then the radiation, then the presence of that person will be much more fluid and open to, yeah, going many different places, not only to the biological, emotional, but perhaps also into deep spiritual states. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think, it might be that the people that we're attracting are already on that path. But I
mm,
also believe that through connection, that people can feel or experience an expansion
mm,
that has them connect to their spiritual being. And I
mm,
I honestly believe that so many people long for that when they feel that. It's like, yes, this is what I want more of.
yeah.
And of course, not everyone will be called to do this work. Yeah, and I think, well, it's interesting that sometimes there's a bit of a bias, maybe in at least in me, for depth, but also in the community, maybe for having a certain type of connection. But what I learn more and more is like it doesn't really matter. It's like what matters is, can I meet life as it presents itself? So
Mm,
even if there is a person that is not yet on that spiritual path, and uh, can I just be with them as they are and as what's arising,
mm,
still bringing myself,
mm.
uh,
Yeah,
and then
I
the
think.
connection to me might feel like, oh, this there's so much more depth and potential possible, but then for them it might be already like an eye opener or heart opener, maybe. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I also speak from my experiences in psychotherapy. I have had some male clients, especially that were not really able to feel anything. They close their eyes, or they try to enter into the inner space when we were in a psychotherapeutic sessions, but there was simply nothing going on. Yeah, it could be an itch in the knee, or very, very, very superficial. They were so stuck in their head, very,
Yeah.
very mental. So
Yeah.
it was a long, long process for me to guide them into different levels of themselves, and to, yeah, actually experience what was going on the inside, because,
Mhm.
yeah, in some way they were trapped in their mind. And that's the experience I'm speaking to, that
Mhm.
there is re- some kind of exchange of energy, and the person you are sitting next to or doing this, um, if there is limitations there, of course, yes, of course, then we adjust with the limitations, accept it and be with it, and embrace it, and then stuff can happen.
Mhm.
So, but I think it's important for the viewers out there that perhaps they get an expectation that they sit next to a person, and then they will just have this amazing experience with love, and they will feel connected in a way they have never been before. But perhaps it's just terrible and a
Mhm.
terrifying experience, and that's also okay.
Yeah.
Um, and that's actually the connection part, to experience with what has not been able to be processed before.
Yeah. Yeah. Shall we dive in?
Yes, and yes, and are we just diving in and see what's going on?
Hmm. Yeah, let me just check in.
Mm.
I want to invite you to also just check in with
Yeah.
yourself. Um, yeah, just noticing what it's like to be you in this moment. So, on an out breath, just following your exhalation all the way down to where your body's touching your seat, and just letting your attention rest for a moment there, feeling the sensations, and then slowly feeling different aspects of your body, just checking in with any sensations, feelings, emotions. Noticing thoughts. And then for a moment, turning your attention or awareness to that which is aware in you. And just for a moment, resting as awareness, being aware of itself. So I want to suggest that we just practice for a couple of minutes together and just explore, maybe a little bit about what it's like to be you in this moment. And I'll just be with you, and we can also explore the connection, what's between us.
Mm.
And I welcome also for you if there's anything you're noticing or feeling in relationship with me, to welcome that as well.
From the get-go, I feel very connected, and we have also done a lot of work, so I'm not surprised, even though we haven't spoken for about a year, I guess. But it's just very natural, and I feel some kind of an expansion in my heart, and a calmness and security in this moment.
Yeah,
Uh,
I feel similar. Like as you opened your eyes, my heart started to. I noticed my heart beating and feeling the expansion as well.
mhm. I feel some contraction in my solar plexus when I allow myself to just rest into what is.
Mm.
But I relate it to this morning where my child didn't want to go to kindergarten.
Mm.
I think it triggers something in me. But it feels superficial. It's just like a wave of something past. The more present experiences to just be silent in a way.
Yeah, I sense that too a bit, and then in my awareness, I become aware of the people that might be listening or watching us. And I think there's a part that would like more content,
Mm.
um, so that we can actually demo something. And then I wonder, maybe this is already a demo of some type of connection. Yeah, as I say that, I become more aware of, like, my heart starts pounding more. There's something like of wanting to be of service that comes more to the foreground in me.
Mm. I'm also aware of the podcast audience, but if I'm totally honest, then I would just sit here and for some moments and just, it's like it's some kind of a really presence and a meditative field of just letting go. And it's a spaciousness.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I'm also perceiving a lot of light, as if reality, and what I'm actually visually seeing is just light, and don't perceive color anymore.
I notice it becomes very, very quiet. It's almost like there's no thoughts. I noticed the sound in your background, but I'm just letting it go. Peace.
Yeah.
Most of the energies are connected with the heart centers and also above my head. It's
When you said that, I noticed my attention and awareness dropped to my pelvic area.
hmm. That was funny. It was like a rabbit.
What I did with my nose.
Yeah, very funny.
It was like when my energy, like my awareness dropped to my pelvic area, my legs started to move and my toes, like as if all of a
Mm.
sudden. I don't think it was also my nose.
Oh, yeah. If we should put some words on the experience, what I like about it is that I'm not going for anything particular. It's like honoring the moment and what naturally occurs when you are connected to another human being. And of course, when we have done so much work together, you and I, then perhaps we more go to a specific place. I don't know, but there is already established a connection. And when I do it with new people, there will more often come anxiety up or some curiosity or some other reaction to being more close to another human being. And so this connection is more clear. It's more because we have established some kind of connection.
Yeah, so the words that I would give to it is, we were dropping into presence right away. So,
Mm,
and I think partly is because there is already a lot of trust between us, um, and I think because we're also we're both deeply immersed in meditation and that kind of practice, we also feel very comfortable
mm,
with, this. I would say the felt sense of those states, and actually, um, yeah, sharing that with one another. And
mm,
then, of course, we've practiced already together, so there is already uh, rapport established. But
mm,
yes, this is what becomes possible when we're just meeting the moment. I just led a weekend in Stockholm, And there was a man I haven't met before, so he was completely new. And at some point, something had come up for him in the circle. And after the circle, I went up to just see, what had come up, and I was being with him in that, in what was happening for him. And actually, he got in touch with some pain, and that pain he used to really feel by himself,
Mm.
in by himself alone. And so as he was feeling it and I was with him, he was kind of, he went intensely into that experience. But then I think it was like 3 or 4 seconds of feeling that pain in connection. We expanded in this field that we were just in as well. So
Mm.
um, this to say that I believe that, yes, we have this rapport and trust already, but it's also possible with
Mm.
people you're meeting
Yeah.
new.
I know there is some core principles related to transformational connection. Could you say a bit about, because as far as I remember, you when you are doing a workshop, you start out by saying, what are the core principles of this type of relating? So could you say a bit about that?
Yeah. So these principles are more like guiding lights while you're
Mm.
practicing. And so there's there's an understanding of them, and then an endless deepening of them in your embodiment.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of them would be turning to the connection. So and revealing what's here. So what we just did is kind of naming, like, this is what I'm noticing or feeling. This is what's happening. And so one of the principles is that whatever is coming up in the connection, there's an invitation to reveal that. And it
Mm.
doesn't mean that you always stay in the connection no matter what is happening. But it's actually also revealing your, no, I don't want to be in connection right now. Or
Mm.
revealing a boundary, or revealing, like, I really didn't like what you just did or what you just said.
Mm.
Or yeah, just whatever is actually happening, that there is an invitation to bring it into the connection. So that's one. The other one is to include your body and embodiment. So yeah, oftentimes our body picks up so much more information and signals than we can process with our cognition.
Mm.
So oftentimes we already feel something in our body, maybe a contraction, or where you just shared, like, oh, there's something happening in my solar plexus. And we don't know yet what it means, but we do invite people to bring that into the connection so that we can explore it. And that might be like, oh, yeah, my heart's beating, or I feel a contraction, or as I'm being with you, I all of a sudden feel this massive pain or stress in my shoulders. And that might mean that the other person goes like, oh yeah, it's true, I feel like, and
Mm.
maybe they had a hard time these last weeks. Or um yeah, we kind of bring it in just because the body has so much more, or so much
Mm.
wisdom to integrate. um the other thing, a principle, is like trusting your experience. And this is for me such a powerful one. Actually, name it now as the third one, but I usually name it as the first one, because
Mm.
that's, trust that whatever is happening in your experience has wisdom, has a message, and is a holds a potential for more consciousness. Or
Mm.
and it's not to say that it's always true, or it's always, but it's definitely something to explore.
Yeah.
So yeah, just trusting that. And then what becomes important next is to be able to discern, like,
Mm.
what is actually happening, or why is that happening. And starting to differentiate between like, okay, this is actually impact that I can share, and this is a projection, or this is not owned. So learning
Yeah,
to own how you make up reality rather than blaming others for what's happening. And
yeah.
that's
I think,
incredibly,
and this one is very important because you can sit in front of a person, and what if you get disgusted
yeah,
by something the other person says or does, or then it can be quite, and then you express your disgust, and you will get perhaps the other person will get wounded and feel rejected, and suddenly we can come into some kind of a drama if we
yeah,
don't have these guidelines.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So there's skillful ways to bring in our experience. And that can include like, oh, I feel a big impact when I hear you, and
Mm,
there's disgust coming up. That
mm,
could be potentially really important feedback or a really important thing to explore. But we
yeah.
can definitely also say like, ah, it's disgusting what you say, or that really disgusts me, but that's actually maybe something gets touched in you that is more like your process. So being able to discern is important and something we work towards too. But um, we can make mistakes as well because we turn to the connection. So we can still
Mm.
also sometimes be like, I'm not sure if this is really owned, but I want to bring it. And if the other person's open to that, you can explore further together.
Yeah, and I think this is where the need for a skilled facilitator comes in, because often we cannot own because it's it's full of shadows, and we are blind. So when we go so deep together and start exploring the shadow aspect of ourselves, that's exactly what is disowned in
Mm.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Then there needs to be some kind of rules about not projecting to the other, and yeah, and then remember, one of them is to own what I experience is my experience, and it's not necessary that it has something to do with the other because it's my experience. And I think that's a very important way for me to deal with unpleasant emotions, that I take full responsibility with what's going on
Mm.
inside of my environment and not put it onto others that I feel the way that I do.
Yeah. And yet, this owning your experience is also uh, very much a maturity practice, I
Mm,
find. So, we don't hold it as a rule, we hold it as a principle or an intention,
mm,
because sometimes I'm not aware that I'm projecting, and I
no,
just, and so we can also help each other see like, where are you projecting, where are you disowning something in yourself, and then help each other deepen
mm,
in that, or yeah, deepen the contact with those shadow parts of ourselves.
yeah,
So I want to hold it as a compassionate, because I find this one is so painful, because it also reveals, if I'm projecting, it also reveals where I'm kind of not fully owning my stuff, so it can
mm,
be very vulnerable. And we lean towards the side of like, let's explore and
mm,
bring it so we can find a deeper truth together,
mm.
rather than only express when you're very, very certain that you're not projecting.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure. But how does this? I know this is a question you very often get. At least I have this question. How is it different from psychotherapy?
Hmm.
Because you are in some way working in the same domain of between the conscious and the unconscious, and sometimes also the superconscious.
Mhm.
So, how does this differ from a psychotherapeutic relation?
Yeah. Uh, I'll answer in a moment. I feel there's just one more principle
Yes, yes.
before the names, and then that's the fifth. and that's like being with what is and embracing what's emergent. So
Mm.
yeah, just being with what's arising in the space or in you from moment to
Yeah.
moment. That's like also a principle. Yeah. So how is it different? Well, first of all, we don't have an intention to fix or change or heal. Um, it's really a presence-based practice,
Mm.
and we're we're meditating on the connection and the relationship and meet what that brings or what we can discover in that.
Mm.
And so that's a big difference, I think, with psychotherapy. But in the process, we do encounter things, and oftentimes, even though we don't have an intention to heal or integrate, what happens is when we meet with presence, when we meet
Mm.
with a loving open curiosity of like, yeah, let's just be with this together,
Mm.
it spontaneously starts to integrate. So we
Yeah,
don't
because
necessarily have that intention, but we see time and time again that that spontaneously might occur, and then healing might happen. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, unfolding happens. When people practice for longer times, I do see that they come much more into an integrated self and
Mm.
being able to lead themselves more in life aligned with their
Mm.
vision or their values. So yeah, that does happen, but it's not necessarily why we practice.
No. And the role between facilitator and practitioner, um, is that what is that guided by? The facility, what type of responsibility do you have as a facilitator?
Yeah. Well, we're practicing. So the five principles I just named is also for us.
Yeah.
Um, and there is a bit of yeah, deep trust that I will be guided by life and I will be guided by truth in the moment. So
Mm.
when I'm with you and something comes up and I'm bringing that into the connection and I'm with a willingness and an openness and a curiosity of like, oh, let's just be with it. I don't need anything. Um, so uh, yeah, that's like my responsibility, or that's also how I practice, and that includes like my nose, or now I feel uncomfortable, now I have a boundary, or I don't want to go there with you, or
Yeah.
yeah. So
And this, I'm trying to listen to my more skeptical part to see because it sounds amazing. It sounds very good. But if we should try to raise the question, when how can the process go wrong? Are there any pitfalls related to this practice? Because I think we understand, the possibilities and the potential of it and the right intention, the beautiful principles of it all. But we are human being and we are quite messy and we have all types of unresolved issues within. So we know that stuff can happen and we can hurt each other and but are there any do you see other could you give an example of how transformational connection can go wrong?
right, yeah, I think what we just spoke to is like when we get triggered and we're not conscious anymore that we're projecting on each other, and then that can get quite messy.
Mm.
Or yeah, when what I also sometimes see is in groups, for example, that someone's all of a sudden they're impacted by something that happens, but then they come out like, "Oh, you crossed my boundaries," and so and I don't want to say it goes wrong, because for me it's all a potential to learn, to meet
Mm.
what's here. Um, but yeah, that's definitely then it can become more tricky. You know,
Mm.
Yeah. Um,
But I see, if I remember back to one of the situations I recall, this practice have a big potential for intimacy. And
mhm.
sometimes, some people cannot control that attraction that comes up. And I remember that there was a guy that became very infatuated and attracted to a woman. And she felt very, very, I will not say abused, but her boundaries was definitely crossed because he tried to be more physical and intimate with a woman, and there was a big drama in the group, and she had a history with some kind of sexual abuse or something like that that get triggered in that. Um, and so for me, I see that because it's not psychotherapy, in psychotherapy, you just know that the therapist has a responsibility and you pay them, and the roles are very clear. But in this space, the roles are not so clear because you can come into a group and just practice with another participant, and then you experience this intimacy, and it's not something that both people necessarily feel. One person can feel disgusted, and another person can feel very attracted.
Mhm.
So I think navigating uh, this intimate field is something that you have to have some kind of a maturity in, or perhaps you can get lost in it, feel rejected, and come out of this feeling rejected and not feeling heard, and because it takes some kind of an ability to hold yourself, understand yourself, be with whatever is emerging in yourself, and not, I would say, not many people can do that because it really takes practice. Well,
Yeah.
that was my 2 cent on this question. How do you relate to that?
Well, I agree. And, it, and what's also when I was listening to you, I also realized, like, isn't that also what's happening in life? And
Exactly.
so, as a facilitator, when things like this occur in my space, I will be supporting the woman to set a boundary and meet with her. Like, actually, had it this weekend, where there was a man wanting more intimacy than the woman wanted. And
Mm,
I was able to support her in setting the boundary. But as she
mm,
was setting the boundary, she had to meet her feeling guilty of, like, oh, now he'll feel bad. And
mm,
I got to meet that. And I think for her, it was really, really relevant to notice, like, uh, yeah, how hard it is for her to set a boundary, to know what the boundary is, and then to set it and then meet what comes up. And I think for her and then the people that were actually holding space, I think it was a very important process for all of
mm,
us to
mm,
realize, like, oh yeah, it's difficult to know what the actual boundary is, how to set it properly, and then to feel everything that comes up with the fear and it in the end she felt actually really empowered and
mm,
like, ah, this was such a good experience. Well, then we had, of course, the other party at the other end who had to, like, it was like, oh, I actually expressed a desire that was
mm,
vulnerable. And then he felt rejected, and
mm,
so he was having, like, his responses were also coming from that trigger of, like, I feel rejected. So he was kind of like lashing out. So in that whole process, it was also super interesting for all of us to meet him
mm,
and see. And then up to a point where he could just feel like, oh, I expressed my desire. Wow,
mm,
how great. And
mm,
now I feel like I gotta know shit, and this is how it feels. And I'm still here. He wasn't collapsing in it.
Mm,
And then, he got some love from other people in the group
mm,
that gave and offered him holding. And
mm.
so
But
what
this was a
most
situation where
emergency.
everything went right because there was a good facilitator that could help
Yeah,
the participants to go through this.
right.
Sometimes you can go from such a group without having perhaps even been able to process or understand what happens. You just feel like shit when you
Mm,
go from the group. But okay, that's part of the journey, that's part because it is some kind of an experiment where you where you open up to the hidden world that exists between us.
mhm.
And I think it takes some courage to do that.
Yeah.
And part of that courage is also to have the risk of not being totally fulfilled when you leave such a workshop or training. Uh, that's my, more realistic experience of the situation.
Mm,
There's not is, and then you can say, okay, this is also life,
mhm.
and it happens all the time. So I think my point with this is only to say to people, you have to have some kind of a preparedness when you go into this space that you can get hurt, but the
Yeah.
opportunity and the benefit of doing it can be huge.
Yeah.
So it's not that different from actual life.
Well, yeah, that's a fair point. And I have sometimes people that want more safety, and then they want me as a facilitator to create that safety for them. But if you really look closely, like I can't create safety. Of course, on
Mm,
some level, I can do some, have some agreements or build a certain container, but yeah, the safety comes from within, like,
mm,
and of course there are boundaries. Like, I don't allow violence or abuse in my space.
mm,
um but I do have an intention to to meet what's there, and to be with the impact that people have.
mm,
um yeah, there is something around that, like, what you said, it is like meeting life,
mm,
and these things occur in day-to-day life and in relationships.
mm.
And what we
Yeah,
want
and
we want yeah, we have an intention to bring that more into consciousness and meet it.
yeah. And
Yeah.
if people get hurt, then they can go to a psychotherapist and try to
Well, I am always available after events, and,
Yes.
people can just reach out to me, and, I will definitely have an intention to keep meeting and
Mm,
being. I don't wanna. Yeah, I felt some pain when you shared about your experience and leaving feeling hurt.
mm,
Like,
mm.
it's not what I want for anyone.
No, of course
Um,
not.
yeah.
But we all have our
Mm,
stories,
yeah,
and traumas are related to it. So I
yeah,
just think it's important to be open to that experience too. So we
mhm,
are not painting some kind of rose-colored fantasy story because life is tough, and some of us really go around with some deep issues that
yeah.
take a lot of time to heal and go through.
And
But I
relation
think
and relationships can be painful as well, like,
exactly.
I
Is
think.
there anything that I think we have come full circle in a way? Is there anything important that we haven't touched on? Something that you would like to address as some kind of an ending note for the people out there who could be curious or to take up this practice?
Yeah, I think just this one phrase that comes to mind, and that um, I hope that people are willing and open to exploring how important relationships are, and how much potential they hold.
Mm.
Um, yeah, if anything, if people take anything away from this conversation, I hope that it's maybe a curiosity to explore it a little bit more,
Mm.
and also, especially also psychotherapists, and yeah,
Mm.
people that
If
work with people.
if people wants to connect with you, I will drop your website. Are there anything upcoming right now if they want to work with
Yeah.
you? Or
Well, there is an online course starting in January the 3rd. It's a
Mhm.
6-week thing. It's a set group, so people can dive in also when you're new to the practice. There's opportunities to work one-on-one with me, and there are events, in-person ones, but the first one is in London, and that would be a 6-month trajectory to.
Mm.
Uh,
That's a physical. That's a physical event? Yes.
that's an in-person event, and there are more throughout Europe,
Mm.
and my colleagues are part of those. So yeah,
Mm. It was so wonderful to connect with you again, and I'm really I cannot recommend you enough. I have a lot of respect, and I just know you are rock solid. You're good at what you do. So, to all my audience out there, Ellen is a gem. If you would like to explore this, so thank you for your participation here, and yeah, we will take up
yes,
perhaps another conversation in the future.
yes. Well, thank you for the invitation. It's really great talking to you and connecting again.
Thank you.
Much love.
Bye bye. Much love.